The forge lab hummed with precision. Rows of mechanical arms moved in perfect synchronization, plasma torches hissing as they sculpted molten steel into gleaming forms. Holographic schematics floated in the air, adjusting in real time as students commanded them with thought-linked interfaces. Sparks burst, danced, and died across the reflective floor. Amid the disciplined rhythm of machinery stood one figure who broke the pattern entirely. A human girl, sleeves rolled, hands filthy, hair tied back with a strip of worn cloth. Her name was Arin, and she did not command machines. She didn't have neural implants or synth-skin interfaces. She worked with her hands, raw, imperfect, and trembling from effort. The assignment had been simple: forge a blade. The material is your choice, but the weapon must reflect your essence. For the genetically perfected students around her, it was an opportunity to display elegance. For Arin, it was a challenge to survive the judgment of those who believed her species obsolete. Around her, the other students, sleek, hybridized beings of alloy and flesh, glanced over with thinly veiled amusement. One of them, a tall youth with metallic veins tracing his arms, smirked as he monitored the forge bots shaping a flawless steel saber. "You'll need more than grit to pass this," he said without looking at her. His name was Vel, and he represented everything Arin was told humanity could never become: efficient, enhanced, superior. Arin didn't respond. She stood at her workbench, her reflection faint in the dull surface. Her workstation's smart systems waited for neural input, but she ignored them. Instead, she reached into her satchel and placed something onto the table: a long, pale shard of bone. The sound it made, a hollow talk, seemed to silence the machines for a moment. Vel turned. "Bone? Are you serious?" A few others looked up from their projects, whispers rippling through the room. Bone wasn't on the materials list. It wasn't even registered by the forge's sensors. It was archaic, useless, something for a museum, not a modern lab. Arin lifted it with care, running her thumb along the rough surface. The texture was imperfect, uneven, scarred. She didn't explain where it came from. She didn't need to. The instructor, an aged synth being with glowing optic lenses, paused beside her. "Unorthodox choice," he said in a tone neither approving nor dismissive. "Do you understand the consequences of using an organic medium?" "Yes," Arin said simply. He regarded her for a moment, then nodded. "Proceed. The assignment allows freedom. Let your work justify your defiance." He moved on, his steps light but deliberate, leaving a trail of faint blue light from his cooling circuits. Arin set the bone against a clamp, gripping it firmly. The others returned to their forges, but she could still feel their attention, the prickling awareness of eyes waiting for her failure. Her tools were primitive: a manual grinder, a carbon torch, a hand file. She pressed the bone against the grinder, and a cloud of fine dust lifted into the air. The sound was raw and organic, out of place amid the symphony of machines. Each motion was deliberate, each scrape a rejection of the perfection that surrounded her. She wasn't competing with their precision. She was fighting for relevance. Humanity had once forged weapons from stone, then bronze, then iron, and now, in a universe ruled by alloys and nanosteel, she was forging one last time, not to dominate, but to remember. Her hands trembled from the vibration. The grinder sparked occasionally when a mineral fleck within the bone resisted. She adjusted her angle, shaping a rough edge. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't symmetrical, but it was hers. Vel's laughter broke her focus. "You're wasting time. That thing will splinter before it cuts anything." She ignored him. She didn't need approval from those who had never known what it meant to struggle. The machines around her purred with the confidence of automation. Her tools screamed with the defiance of effort. Hours passed. Sweat streaked her face, mixing with the fine dust clinging to her skin. When she paused to wipe her brow, her reflection in the metallic bench startled her, a face both weary and fierce. For a moment she thought of Earth, of the wars her people had barely survived, of bones buried under ash. Her chest tightened. Humanity's legacy wasn't strength or beauty, it was endurance. She resumed her work with renewed focus. The bone surface began to change beneath her hands. It no longer looked fragile. The fibers gleamed faintly under the torch's light, revealing a resilience hidden within. She didn't understand it yet, but she felt something stirring, an intuition born from instinct, not programming. The instructor circled back, observing silently. Vel's saber gleamed beside him, balanced and flawless. When the instructor reached Arin's station, he said nothing for a while. His mechanical eyes lingered on the bone's emerging edge. Finally, he asked, "Why bone?" Arin hesitated, then spoke, her voice quiet but unwavering. "Steel remembers the forger's design. Bone remembers the struggle that shaped it." The instructor inclined his head slightly, a gesture of respect few had earned. "Then let's see which memory holds stronger." As he moved on, Vel rolled his eyes, muttering something about sentimentality. Arin ignored him again, her focus absolute. Each stroke of the file drew her closer to something that felt alive beneath her fingers, as if the weapon itself was remembering her intent. When the forge cycle ended, alarms sounded softly, signaling the close of the day's session. Students placed their finished weapons on display racks, some already glancing toward the scoring terminal. Arin stayed behind a moment longer, brushing the last of the bone dust from her blade. It was crude, unpolished, and utterly distinct. The surface gleamed faintly under the sterile lights. Neither metal nor flesh, but something between. She exhaled slowly, feeling the tremor fade from her arms. The laughter, the whispers, the doubt, all of it blurred into silence. She laid the blade flat on the table, its irregular edge catching the light. It looked alive. When she finally lifted her eyes, Vel was watching her, not with amusement this time, but unease. For the first time, he seemed unsure of his certainty. Arin met his gaze, her expression unreadable. The next day's test would reveal whose creation truly held power. For now, she had forged something more than a weapon. She had forged the beginning of defiance. Arin woke before the dormitory lights brightened, her hands still aching from the previous day's work. The memory of grinding bone returned in flashes, dust rising like pale smoke, the stubborn resistance of the material, and the quiet moment when she realized it was changing beneath her touch. She flexed her fingers, feeling both exhaustion and anticipation. Today the class would test their blades. Today she would learn whether her defiance had weight or was merely stubborn pride wrapped in sentiment. As she walked through the corridor toward the forge lab, she replayed a memory she rarely allowed herself to revisit. A barren ridge under a bruised sky. The sound of something vast moving through ash. The moment she had stood alone with nothing but a shattered tool and a heartbeat of raw fear. The creature she killed that day had not been a simple animal. It had been engineered for war, a fusion of sinew and reinforced bone. She had survived by instinct and desperation. The bone she carried now had been taken from that creature's remains, a reminder of a victory no one believed a human could achieve. She didn't cling to it for nostalgia. She carried it because it embodied truth. Struggle shapes strength more honestly than perfection ever could. The lab doors slid open as she approached, releasing a wave of heat and metallic scent. Students were already gathered at their stations, their blades gleaming under the lights. Vel stood near the testing console, his posture confident, his saber resting against his shoulder like an extension of his own engineered body. He glanced at Arin the moment she entered, eyes sharp, expression unreadable. There was no mockery today, only calculation. Arin approached her workbench, uncovering the bone blade she had shaped. It looked different under the morning light, paler, almost luminescent, the fibers seeming to shift subtly, as if reacting to warmth. She traced the edge with a slow finger, feeling the faint ridges where organic structure met deliberate shaping. It wasn't perfect by any conventional measure, but it held a kind of vitality the steel blades lacked. The instructor called the class to order. His voice, calm and synthesized, carried authority without aggression. Today's evaluation focuses on structural integrity, adaptive potential, and philosophical accuracy. Your blade must not only survive the trials, it must represent your intent. His mechanical eyes swept across the room before settling briefly on Arin. We begin with controlled strikes. Vel stepped forward immediately, volunteering with effortless confidence. He placed his saber on the stand as the automated arm swung down with calibrated force. The steel met the impact with a bright clang, sparks flaring. The blade survived the first strike, then the second, but the third created a thin fissure along the edge. Vel's jaw tightened, though he masked it quickly. Not unexpected, he muttered. Steel adapts poorly to repetitive shock. The instructor recorded the result, then looked toward Arin. Your turn. She lifted the bone blade, feeling the strange warmth it held, almost as if it absorbed her touch. A murmur rippled through the class as she set it onto the stand. Vel folded his arms, brows drawn together, watching every movement with sharpened interest. The forge arm descended. The impact resonated through the room, a deep thud rather than metallic ring. The bone didn't crack. It didn't dent. It absorbed the force entirely, the shock dispersing through the blade structure like water rippling across a surface. A second strike followed, harder. Again the blade held, its surface shimmering faintly under the lights. Students stepped closer, curiosity overcoming arrogance. Even the instructor leaned in slightly, his sensors adjusting focus. On the third strike, something changed, not in the blade, but in the arm. The machine's joints stuttered, as though the energy returning through the bone disrupted its calibration. The instructor halted the sequence immediately. The material is anomalously resilient, he said, turning toward Arin. Explain its origin. She hesitated, not out of fear, but out of uncertainty about how much to reveal. It came from a creature engineered for conflict, she said quietly. I encountered it on a frontier world. I survived. It didn't. The room fell silent, not out of disbelief, but out of recalibrated assumptions. Vel's eyes narrowed, not in scorn, but in suspicion. You killed something like that by yourself? He asked. Arin didn't answer with words. She simply met his gaze, and something in her expression, a mixture of exhaustion and steady certainty, made him look away first. The instructor nodded slowly. Your choice of material aligns with your intent. But resilience alone is not enough. We must test precision. A series of obstacles unfolded from the floor. Simulated armor plating, kinetic barriers, and a mesh of energy threads. Students took turns demonstrating their blade's efficiency. Alloy sabers sliced cleanly through metal, but faltered at the energy mesh. Plasma-coated daggers scorched the barriers, but shattered against reinforced plating. When Arin stepped forward, the class watched her with held breath. She gripped the bone blade tightly, feeling its weight settle into her palm. The first strike cut through the armor plating with unexpected smoothness, the organic fibers sensing resistance and adjusting distribution along the edge. Against the kinetic barrier, the blade didn't bounce. It slipped through, bending minutely before returning to shape. The final test was the mesh. Vel had failed to pass it, and she could feel his gaze drilling into her back. She inhaled slowly, stepped forward, and swung. The blade didn't slice through the threads. It severed them cleanly, absorbing their energy instead of resisting it. The mesh dissipated with a soft shimmer. A hush fell over the room. The instructor recorded the results without speaking. He didn't need to. Everyone understood what they had witnessed. Arin lowered the blade, her breath unsteady but her stance firm. She wasn't triumphant. She was resolute. Vel approached her afterward, his expression conflicted. Your blade shouldn't be able to do that, he said quietly. Arin wiped a smear of dust from its surface. Neither should I, she replied. His stare lingered, and for the first time, there was no contempt, only recognition of a challenge he hadn't anticipated. The day's tests weren't finished, but the shift in the room was unmistakable. Arin wasn't just participating anymore. She was altering expectations, even her own. Arin entered the forge hall the next morning with a calm that surprised even her. The bone blade rested against her hip, wrapped in cloth that failed to soften its strange presence. Every student pretended not to stare, but their gazes clung to her like static. The test from the previous day had unsettled them. They had seen something that challenged their assumptions about both material and maker. Even Vel, normally composed in his engineered superiority, watched her with a wary calculation that hinted at something unfamiliar to him: doubt. Arin sensed it, but didn't revel in it. She needed clarity, not victory. The instructor summoned the class to the central platform where their final evaluations would take place. Above them, a wide containment dome shimmered to life, its curved surface capturing reflections of steel, bone, and tense anticipation. Today, the instructor announced, "You will justify your creations. Explain your intent. Demonstrate your relationship to the blade you forged. The weapon is not merely metal or matter. It is an articulation of identity." His voice resonated through the dome, calm, steady, relentless. Arin tightened her grip on the blade's wrapped handle, feeling its familiar warmth pulse faintly beneath her fingers. Students presented in ascending order of complexity. One by one, they stepped forward, their blades gleaming with technical perfection but hollow of experience. They spoke of efficiency, precision, raw computational advantage. Their voices carried pride, but their reasoning traveled in predictable arcs that echoed the Academy's doctrine. Vel's turn came near the end. He delivered a poised explanation of structural harmony and optimized geometry. His saber, though slightly marred from testing, still shone with confidence. His performance was nearly flawless. Yet when he returned to his place, he avoided Arin's eyes. The small fissure in his blade had shaken something foundational in him. When the instructor called Arin's name, the hall's quiet shifted. She stepped forward, unwrapping the bone blade slowly. It caught the dome's light differently than steel, absorbing, refracting, bending. A soft hush rippled across the students, as if the blade itself commanded their restraint. Arin held it with both hands, letting them see the uneven ridges along its edge, the pale grooves of organic structure fused with purposeful shaping. "This blade," she began, "was forged from a creature built for violence, a creature meant to outmatch anything human. I survived it because survival is what humans learned first, long before refinement, augmentation, or augmentation's promises." Her words carried no bravado. They were measured, grounded, carved from memory. She described how she had taken the bone not as a trophy, but as a reminder that strength earned through struggle carries meaning beyond engineered capacity. She explained that she shaped it not to mimic perfection, but to express a truth particular to her species. Humans endure because they must, not because they are designed to win. She lifted the blade slightly, letting it tilt toward the instructor. "Steel can be flawless," she said softly, "but bone remembers." The room held its breath. The instructor nodded slowly. "Your philosophy aligns with your craftsmanship, but the final evaluation is practical. A blade must demonstrate purpose in motion." He gestured, and segments of the containment floor opened, revealing the holographic training constructs used for advanced students. Adaptive projections capable of responding unpredictably. Vel stepped forward involuntarily. "She shouldn't be tested alone against those," he said. The instructor regarded him with mild curiosity. "Are you volunteering to join her?" Vel hesitated, then stepped back, jaw tight. "No, it's her blade being evaluated, not mine." Arin felt a flicker of empathy she didn't expect. The constructs activated, forming three adversaries: armored, agile, and shifting between offense patterns. Arin inhaled deeply, centering herself. The bone blade vibrated faintly in her grip, as if recognizing imminent threat. She stepped into the arena, and the first construct lunged immediately. Arin dodged, feeling the predictive algorithms tracking her. She countered with a swift arc, and the blade sliced cleanly through the projection's shield, disrupting its form. The second construct approached from behind, striking with a flurry of calculated blows. The bone blade absorbed each impact, distributing the force along its organic fibers, enabling her to parry without staggering. The final construct shifted into a heavier form, advancing with brutal directness. Arin held her ground, focusing on its pattern. At the precise moment it committed to a downward strike, she stepped into its shadow and drove her blade upward. The projection fractured, dissolving into particulate light. The dome dimmed, signaling the sequence's completion. The hall remained silent for several heartbeats. Arin lowered the blade, breathing hard but steady. She had not been graceful nor elegant, but she had been deliberate, adaptive, and unbroken. The instructor approached, his mechanical eyes whirring softly. "Your blade fulfilled its purpose," he said. "More importantly, so did you." Vel stepped closer, uncertainty written across his features. "Humanity shouldn't be underestimated," he admitted, voice low. Arin offered a small nod, accepting his acknowledgement without triumph. The instructor raised his voice for the class. "Remember this lesson. Perfection is not the only path to power." Arin glanced at her blade, feeling a quiet resolve settle within her. This was not the end of her struggle. It was only the beginning.